long overdue.
Yeah?
Mr. Suli breaks.
Was good.
But you tell me, man, how's things with you?
Things are great. I can't complain. I don't have anything really to complain about. If I did, I'll just, yeah, I'm good.
You know what's funny? Like, so this is like an inside joke. The way this actually came about, this is like, do you know what the funny thing is? And I'll say this. With my channel, because I'm not in front of the camera,
Yeah.
I never know that anyone knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It allows me to go around not getting any form of ego. And but when you said that, yo, I think you're G-Fresh Introspection, I was thinking, right, you've seen it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
get what
yeah.
I'm saying? And I was like, first off, man, shout out to you watching it, man.
Nah,
I didn't even know that you even checked it out. Bro.
Nah, I've been checking stuff on the channel, and G, obviously, like, G-Fresh is like, he's just epic. I think people don't appreciate the level of epicness, like, in his contribution towards music, you know what I mean, is I think it's understated.
100%, yeah. Here's a funny thing that I want to put to you. I say the next 50 years, you're going to be one of the people who's going to be one of the leaders of our time. I genuinely believe that. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why I believe so. Minus the viral numbers, which is in itself. The fact that within poetry or the art form, that's communication. You found a way to effectively communicate something that's internal, and externally it's being received. And then from there, you're able to explain what it is that you're creating, what you're describing. And it starts to seep into people's consciousness. And not many politicians can't even do that.
But I feel like musicians do the same thing.
But it's within the realms of music.
Yeah.
Your one is, it's still, I'm saying within the realms of the poetry world, you've now been seen as probably like one of the most effective communicators of our current time.
Fair enough. Especially
Globally as well, but especially within where we are here in London. And I think some of the things that you're saying, like your ideologies, you're able to get out. And that's sometimes more powerful than just societal trends. Sometimes people just see what's going on, but you're almost challenging what is going on. That's from my observation.
Yeah.
But I want to wheel it back. Daryl. Who is Daryl?
You can't be hot enough, man.
Oh, we got it?
Only people that really, to be honest, only people that call me Daryl is maybe like my aunt, my grandma, and the people that used to work whenever I had a job, that obviously government name and stuff like that.
But I mean, who is? It's not.
Yeah, I know you're saying who am I?
Daryl before we got into Suli breaks.
I'm just a kid. I don't know. I'm just a man that's interested about life. You know what I mean? I was interested about our environment, but I grew up like most kids in any ends. You know what I mean? I moved around a little when I was young, but I think I really came into in my formative years. I came into maturity living in Wood Green, you know, and I was just like any other kid. I was just trying to find a way to fit in, but at the same time find a way that gave me some kind of identity. You know, there was man that had identity because them man were on certain things, or you know, they was doing this and doing like not the most productive things, but you know, it gave you reputation, and I guess reputation gave you a sense of safety, but also it gave you a sense of belonging. And in all that, I was just like many kids trying to find that. And my passions, I've always loved reading, you know, I've always loved like, you know, I like cartoons, and I've always had a massive passion for music. You know, when I was young, I used to really like basketball as well. Like basketball was something I really enjoyed. That's where, yeah, that's I found a lot of my identity and my and what I admired about people within the figures I respected in that field.
What kind of figures were those then?
I mean, when we're looking at basketball, one of the things it really taught me was tenacity and kind of like the concept that nothing can be achieved without hard work. So I'm looking at like Kobe Bryant, you know, like a consummate hard worker. Kobe Bryant's established, like his work ethic is next to none, rigorous. And then you had like Allen Iverson, that's the era in which I was growing up. He's defiant, you know what I mean? Against all odds, everybody looks at him. First of all, he's from the hood, you know, he's got cornrows, got tattoos. They changed the NBA dress code because of him. He's not supposed to succeed, you get what I'm saying? And he overcome all adversity despite all the factors that was supposed to be negative around him, and he became who he was. You know, these kind of figures really showed me that, especially as a young black man, that you can make your own success irrespective of what a wider society expects of you, as long as you put in the effort and the work.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you were saying that you grew up in Wood Green, right?
Yeah.
I used to go Wood Green in my teenage years, and I remember at that point that I was aware of there was things going on.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of that? I don't know what point you left Wood Green, but were you conscious of
I only left Wood Green not too long ago. But,
really?
well, like maybe 3-4 years ago. But yeah, so I kind of moved back to Wood Green. I think when I was in, so my family always had the house there. We house flat. I used to live there when I was younger. Then I lived in Ghana for a little while. We came back. I think I was in South for like 2 years. Then went to East London for like a year or two, my grandma's house. And then I came back to Wood Green, and I kind of came back at like the height of what Wood Green was. Wood Green, I think I was year 10, so I must have been like 15, 14.
Ooh, that's when schools were getting.
Yeah, at that time. That's the time you couldn't go up to tops, like, you know what I mean? You know where the cinema is? Like, you couldn't go up there. Like, well, obviously, if you're from there, you need to walk through there. But if you wasn't from there, you don't really want to be caught slipping there because it was mad. Or you don't want to go back the avenues. Like, Wood Green, that's when they used to call it City of God, you know what I mean? And we would internalize that, like, this place is crazy, you know? Even though I lived there, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't in any, like, certified, like, a crew or anything. Like, it was always, like, people would always try it, you know what I mean? By benefit of being affiliated with certain people who are friends, like, oh, but he knows his friend did it. You kind of get you get a bit of leeway, but really, a little bit of leeway, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, oh no, but he's cool with Jesse though. No, they live on this, you know what I mean? But outside of that, it was like Wood Green was crazy, and especially when you were from Wood Green, trying to go to other areas as well. There was always that stigma associated with, oh, like, from Wood Green, who do you know in Wood Green? Where you from in Wood Green? To know that whether they had beef or it was gonna be, you know what I mean?
I mean, and this is the thing, with that type of mindset, which is a mindset that manifests into real life, how much of it do you think that is kind of like created in our minds that if it becomes to be feeling like it's more than what it is? Because, you know, you'll be like, okay, I live here, I can't go over there.
Yeah.
Is that deep for some, but do we over heighten it?
I think the fear magnifies itself in your head because, like, you live in the context of Wood Green, but a certain reality in Wood Green. And I think in that reality, those fears are very real and very apparent. But what we never really appreciate was that that reality only constitutes a certain part of the whole spectrum of the environment, do you understand? So a small reality in which we lived in was not indicative of the entire reality of Wood Green, because there was tourists coming in and out, or there was like people who'd come in completely neutral from Muswell Hill or Barnet. But I think particularly when you're young and you grow up in London, like, you are forced to, like, to adhere to the codes of conduct of those environments. Like, right now, I'm a big man, you know, I can walk, I live in South now, you know what I mean, but I can go to Peckham to buy food and stuff like that, and there's no, I don't need to, well, obviously, because people kind of know what I do and it's a bit respectful, but I'm less, like, apprehensive about what's gonna go off, you know what I mean? But I can imagine that if I was a lot younger, I'd still have some of that reluctancy and fear associated with me.
That's the one thing that I think what you just said is, like, now you almost feel good that you've actually matured into a man where when you walk outside, you don't think or see certain things, but if you walk with a younger person, they're like, yo, like that guy. I'm like, it's not.
Yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And I remember being like 2011 or like, I was probably working in Nike Town at the time, and I remember this young kid, he came in. At the time I was still living in Wood Green, but he was like, oh, I'm in school. He goes, yeah, like all the Wood Green boys run up in the school. Our school, he's from Tottenham, innit? And it was mad. And I was like, right, is it still peak like that? But even a friend of mine, and then you think about a friend of mine who's like my age, he recently got stabbed, you know what I mean? And it was like he got stabbed in Tottenham, but it was a bit crazy because I thought like it got associated with something that I thought doesn't happen anymore. Do you kind of get what I'm saying? And he's a big man, he's kind of removed from this stuff, but just being in that environment, it made him like, he became exposed to these things. So it still happens, and I thought, right, I guess that dichotomy still exists to an extent.
When you're young, going through that life after school, so you come home, you go back to Woods Green, you know what I mean? Like, how does it affect, at that point, are you doing poetry? Or
nah.
No poetry? Is it
no
rap?
Poetry. I was playing basketball. That was
just basketball, right? When does the poetry become
that was a lot later. Like, I was writing, so basically it was like, I used to go to school in East London, so I went to school in Isle of Dogs. So I'd come all the way from East London, I'd come to Wood Green, and it was weird because in school it was school, but I feel like for me, when I moved back to Wood Green, I realised I really started to experience life and reality, and to an extent it was kind of like an excitement of discovery. So I'd come back to Wood Green, and for me that was the first time I could identify with a world that I lived in, that wasn't just like going from school and back, you know what I mean? There was these kind of understandings and communal kind of trends and stuff I was associating with, you know. And my cousin at the time lived in Tottenham, so that was the first time we really got to hang around with each other. So I think that was the first time I really started to get into rap music, and that was my first relationship with lyrics, you know, and understanding and appreciating them, because I started to listen to Jay-Z, And outside of when you're growing up listening to Eminem, who everyone can kind of find some relatable factor with him, because maybe it's either entertaining or because, you know, his story is a bit like dramatic, or the way he articulates is easy to access. So that's the first time I started listening to Jay-Z, and it was like he was talking about economics, and he was talking about like society, and he was talking about like class and all these kind of things, and I could see it around me. And that was the first time music ever made sense to me. And that was me coming back from school, listening to those lyrics while studying for GCSEs. That's when lyrics started to become a thing. And then grime started to develop, you know what I mean? We're listening to, obviously I'm going to school in East London, they're talking about Rough Squad, they're talking about Wiley, they're talking about Dizzy, you know what I mean? I remember listening to that Wiley album, and for the first time, it became possible that, oh, we could make some of these lyrics as well. We could make some of these words as well. So I think that's where my first relationship with anything that was a semblance of poetry in any capacity was first formed. And then it was much later in uni where it evolved into poetry. And that's what we're talking about, maybe like a good 11, 10, 12, 5 years later.
Do you know, I was touching on, you said you went to Ghana for a couple, was it for a year or two?
When I was a kid, I was young. I lived there for like 3 years, yeah.
Well, what was the age group that you went?
I came back in year 3, so count back 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was young.
And the funny thing is, not even funny that you speak your language still.
Yeah, of course.
Seen that. See, now that's why I feel bad.
Like, yeah, you man are lacking though, man. I don't know, maybe I don't know, maybe I've just got a good memory, but I've never kind of understood that whole, like, I used to speak it when I was younger, then I stopped speaking it and I forgot it. For me, it was like, once I learned the language, I mean, my little sister lived in Ghana for like, she lived in Ghana when from between like, maybe like 14 to 16 or whatever, and she still forgot how to, she was speaking Tree the whole time she came back, and she forgot how to speak it. Well, she speaks it bits and pieces, but I don't know. For me, it was always just like, it's my language, isn't it? Like, and I mean, I had the benefit that my sister only a year apart, so we were always in school together. Up until year 11, we've always been in school together. So I think we always used to speak with each other as well.
That's the jewel.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
I guess so. Having someone to speak to, maybe that's what it is.
But here's the thing, though. Do you see it like what you're doing? How will it affect your people back home? In terms of, you're making such a big impact here. I'm not saying that you're not doing anything back there, but I'm presuming there must be, not an end game, but there must be something that within Ghana that you may be working towards. I don't know,
I think my relationship with Ghana is that, for me, because I used to go back every summer, when my parents lived there, innit? So I used to go back, my dad lives there, so I used to go there every summer. So what happens with Ghana is I go there and surprisingly I get a lot of love, you know what I mean? Because I could say that...
So where people recognise you?
Yeah, Ghana, like, because the thing about Ghana, we really champion people from the diaspora who excel, but more so I used to go to Ghana every summer, so I have friends there, you know what I mean, for like 3-4 years straight. So when I went back this time, they were like, oh, Suli, man, I've been telling everyone you're a Tema boy, they don't believe me, come on the Snapchat for a piece, you know what I mean? I'm walking past people who aren't, do you understand? So in Ghana, I get a lot of kind of like reception from the art form, mainly because of online, you know what I mean? And the fact that I never shy away from the fact that I'm saying I'm Ghanaian, you know, I actively embrace it. So I feel like for me, it's more like the messages. I think a lot of things that stagnates progress in Africa in general, some of the countries or some of the people there, is the mentality. Obviously there's the poverty, there's economic issues which are very fundamental, but then at the same time there's this thing where there's a certain mentality that's kind of like prevalent. And I feel like for me, my only like biggest contribution would be to kind of cause a shift in that mentality, and hopefully that encourages people to empower themselves, and then in return empower the nation, you know?
I was going to pull out the title of the poem. What's the poem when you were trying to like talk about the educational system? I
got 2. I will not let an exam result decide my fate, and why I hate school but love education.
Now, those 2 things are very prevalent especially in Africa, West African and Nigerian, let's just say African culture in general. You must have this, you must have that. What was the actual, we're using the word dichotomy a lot, what was the dichotomy of saying that, actually, this is what my culture's saying, but this is what I'm saying, which is slightly against, or a new way of thinking. What weighed that up for you to actually attack that in your poems?
I think it's life, bro. Like I was in school my whole life, and I was a good student, you know what I mean? I wasn't the best, but I was a good student. And I feel like coming out of the other end and like working, like I had door-to-door job, done Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer, cleaning. You know, I've done jobs like proper, you know, graft jobs, and you know, like I'm a lawyer. Do you get what I'm saying? I graduated as with a law degree, not a lawyer, qualified. But and it was like the reality that there's a lot of my peers who are aspiring to this end result, but they don't know that the reality of it is so much different from the perceived reality that they've been given initially. So for me, it was kind of like, that's all I know. Like, I've always talked about things that I know, and when I haven't had something to talk about, it's because I haven't maybe had enough experiences. So I've been in education for 12 years, and it's like, this is my perspective of it. So it was kind of like a no-brainer.
Nah, it was when you, those who haven't seen it, well, most people have, but when you listen to it, it opens your mind to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like, I remember when I went to uni, I never understood the mentality of a jobs glut, meaning that there's how many universities, how many degrees are being sold, how many jobs are available.
Yeah.
And you look at it, there may only be like 500 law jobs currently available.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, there's probably like maybe 30,000 degrees being, and they actually are being sold.
Yeah, you're creating a supply for a limited demand. Yeah. You know, there's what's it called? There's no kind of like, there's no correlation. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And there's no equilibrium. It's not like, okay, cool, you come out of this, and then if you get a first, that's not the same. If you get a 2-1, that's not the same as a first. If you get a first tier, that's not the same as a 2-2 in Cambridge.
Yeah.
That's just.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So I know people who've been finessed. I know people who go to Cambridge just to get 2-2 so they can say they're from Cambridge. And it's like, rah, but a man in Kent's busting his ass to get a first, and that's not going to be the same as the equivalent of going to get a 2-2 in Cambridge. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, I just feel like that's what it was. And at the time, think about it, like everyone I knew was really students, everyone was graduating, so it was more so, yeah, this is what I know. And I've always approached poetry as like, if I can't communicate like a conversation to my boy, like if I can't do it, because don't forget, at times when I'm doing poetry, it's kind of moist, you know what I mean? Everyone's saying, right, you're doing poetry, so I had to make sure that man them were getting what I was saying. I had to make sure that I was really saying stuff where it was like, nah, you're talking some shit, you know what I mean? Then that's what I think that's where that kind of clear cut delivery and communication of my ideas came from, because people, I didn't want people to listen to it and be like, "Raw, what's my man on? Like, he's doing this poetry thing and he's not even making sense." I want people to hear it and be like, "He's doing this poetry thing, but it's kind of hard still. Like, he's actually making sense," and that's where that came from.
So in the previous two poems we were talking about, what kind of lines, if you can remember, I know you got so many lyrics, what kind of lines do you feel illustrate some of the points that you were making about the system doesn't really add up in terms of education, like? Because I remember I was watching it, like, and there were so many quotables, I was actually writing them down.
Oh, serious? You was on it like that?
I wanted to do that whole Rap Genius thing.
Oh, serious? Should have bust it, boy. It's on Rap Genius still. I thought, I don't know, there's a lot of lines. I think with the first poem, the first one, Why I Hate School But Love Education, there was a lot of lines. One of the lines that I often get quoted for, which is a line I took from someone else, Tony Gaskins, big him up, he deserves 100% credit for that line. And I think the line was, if you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to help build yours. I think that line really resonated, help build theirs, sorry. I think that line really resonated with a lot of people. I think the whole poem, the way it started, it was like, so you want to get a degree, why? And I start listing it, and all these people have been successful without a degree, some of them are inaccurate. And then I go on to say like, okay, so what are you doing it for? To work? Some people say I don't do it for the money, and I said, so what are you going to school for? To work for a charity? Need more clarity. And then I started listening. More people have been successful without a degree, which probably wasn't 100% accurate either, because I didn't do the due diligence. But at the end, it was kind of like the whole coming together of saying, after. One of my favourite lines, I think the dopest line I wrote in there was, after nights of a dead mind, I then find myself in a queue of half-awake student zombies waiting to hand in an assignment. Maybe that's why they called it a deadline. You know what I mean? I feel like that was a line. And then,
that's bars,
yeah, I feel like people slept on it. I was proud when I write stuff, because people are so like immersed in the overall message, they kind of lose the little like influences. And I think at the end of that, I was like, I used to go to class where I could find a spot and rest my head I can't remember. I used to go to class and find a spot on which I could rest my head without falling asleep. That's the only time I ever spent in university chasing my dreams, you know what I mean? And I feel like in those kind of semblance, people are like, you know, that's me. You know what I mean? That's me standing in the line. That's me running to class just so I can fall asleep. And I think all those kind of messages is what really hit home. And then I think the way I ended the poem, where it was like, look at someone like David Beckham. Like, man can kick a ball and, well, them times, kick the ball, make it, you know, do all this stuff, yeah? And you don't tell me that's not education, you know? Don't tell me he hasn't educated himself in a specific field. You know what I mean? And I think that's where those are the kind of things that really resonate, where people could see themselves in the poem.
That was phenomenal, man. Also the graveyard though, man. That was. Walk me through what inspired you to write The Graveyard.
The graveyard. I see dead people, men walking into offices, sitting coffins, people handing in, people. I see dead people, men walking into offices and sitting coffins, people handing death certificates disguised as salaries. I live in London Bridge now, innit? So this is literally what I see. Like, you know what I mean? Morning, people rushing. Like, you see all the commuters, everybody, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's not no disrespect to anybody who works any kind of job, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know what I mean? Whatever drives you. But it was what I saw, you know, there was a lot of people who were impassively just going through this. And then I'm talking to my friends, and then in one phone call, they're saying, oh yeah, I'm earning this much, I'm getting a promotion. Then when they pick up the phone to me, they're like, bruv, this is long, you know what I mean? This is like, you know, they're not fulfilled, they're hollow inside, you know what I mean? So that was really it. It was more just that reality of, so that's why I didn't say I'm a dead person. If I wasn't, I would have said it, but I said I see dead people, you know, and that's where that kind of came from.
You know why that stuck with me? Because I used to work in Liverpool Street in finance.
Yeah.
So when I listened to it, I was like, you know, like in the morning, that rush hour.
Yeah.
Even the words, rush hour. Why are we rushing for? If we don't get this one, we'll get the next one. But you're almost worried that if you're, oh, I can't be late.
Exactly.
It's actually not, it's not.
It's not.
Your body shouldn't really, I just feel like it creates a chemical imbalance. Like, you become anxious, like.
I've seen some people dive into the train, put one leg in, like, you know what I mean? And it's tough, innit? You know what I mean? It's tough because everyone's got to make ends meet and you got to do what you got to do. But the fact that you never take time to consciously be like, how much of myself am I actually sacrificing to meet this end? Which at the end of the day, it's like, is that your long-term goal? Or what is the most fulfilling aspect of that? That you're sacrificing yourself, you know what I mean? Because I think I say in it, when was the last time you fed your soul? You know what I mean? And didn't, you know, you know? So I feel like that last time you fed your soul, and then your parents teach you to always finish your plate. You know what I mean? I feel like, you know, yeah, I mean.
You're dropping them.
So, you know, I'm saying, how much are you like, you know, how much are you giving yourself outside of that, you know? So I feel like those were the little things.
When I'm sure you must have had friends who were within that system, he was like, bro, like, that's me. Do you get what I mean? You must have had like a lot of people. What was the response thereafter? I know the views are crazy, but actually responses to that poem that people actually.
I mean, some people get defensive in it. Some people come back and they're like, oh, online, especially people you don't know, they feel like, oh, not everyone can be creative. I didn't say that, you know what I mean? I never once said that. I just said whatever you're doing, make sure you're fulfilled about it. And so I feel like that was a general response, saying, oh, just because you're creative and you can be successful doesn't mean that everyone else can do it, etc., etc., etc. But for me, it was more so like, that's not what I'm advocating. I think a lot of people actually resonated and was like, this is so real, you know what I mean? This is what I experience at the moment. I think that takes strength in itself to admit the situation you're in, because then it makes you try and take productive steps to kind of alleviate yourself of that situation.
I mean, it's interesting that some people have taken it as an attack when it... But
it was an observation. That's the world, you know what I mean? People hear 1-2 lines, make an assumption. People see a headline, make an assumption, you know what I mean? And I mean, the online world thrives on that. Some people actively seek those reactions to keep the traction of their work going.